The creators of Game of Thrones talked about what they would do with Jon Snow if they were to bring him back. I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint. Their idea sucks. 2024 is going to be the year of Westeros, House of the Dragon. They're filming Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We've got all the momentum around Game of Thrones and all the lore that goes around that right now due to a fantastic season 1 of House of the Dragon. And that's coming off of people having a lot of bad blood at the way Game of Thrones ended for a show that was one of the greatest shows in the history of television. And it came along before the streaming wars and before COVID. It ended right before COVID. And the way people have changed the way they consume content. And Game of Thrones was a phenomenon, but it ended badly. And we've talked about it ad nauseum about the creators, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and how they were looking for more money and they had other options, and they ended up basically just phoning in the last 2 seasons. Pissed a lot of fans off. A lot of people thought that Game of Thrones, we would never revisit Westeros again on live action on the TV screens or otherwise. But we did. We got House of the Dragon, and it was a huge success. Ryan Condal kicked butt on it, worked with George R. R. Martin, brought him back into the fold. He was out after midway through the Game of Thrones series. But now we have the creators of the live-action TV series, Benioff and Weiss, out promoting their new series for Netflix that's going to be called The Three-Body Problem. And they talked about Game of Thrones, and specifically, they were asked about the in-development Jon Snow series. So first of all, before we get into what they said and I rip them a new one, make sure to smash that like button, hit the notifications bell, and most importantly, hit subscribe so we can continue to grow our channel. Let me ask you, Game of Thrones, how did you feel about the series as a whole and the way it ended? Do you kind of agree with what the sentiment was with the fans? Like, what were your thoughts around Game of Thrones as a whole and Benioff and Weiss's role in that?
Well, I think for the first 6 seasons, it was probably the greatest show that ever existed, in my opinion. I went back and I'm currently watching it again, and we just got through the 3rd season with the red wedding scene. So
one of the best
shows and ever, honestly. And then really, I think was it season 7 when they really kind of had to go off? I can't remember.
Well, season 6, for those that maybe have not read the books or have read the books, Jon Snow dies at the end of the 5th book. And so we don't have, because George R. R. Martin is busy doing other things, we don't have the book that tells ultimately what happened after he was killed by the Night's Watch. And so they really started deviating in season 6.
And there was some great content in those later seasons. Like the Battle of the Bastards, I think, was probably the single best
Fantastic.
episode. It was amazing.
Some people criticize season 6 because they for different reasons, some valid, some not, because George was not involved at that point. He really checked out after season 4, somewhere in season 5. They had a falling out, and he exited. But season 6, I love season 6. Season 7 is where it started to not make sense. Characters doing things that we didn't see them do for the prior 6 seasons. It was out of character for them to do the things they did.
From my understanding, though, George at least gave him a blueprint to work off of.
A few things,
right?
Not everything. There's been speculation about what he told them would happen, which I believe he's since changed that since the show has ended. But things started speeding up. You started having Varys getting across the narrow sea and back in a matter of an episode.
Well, they took so much time on everything throughout the entire
series. Which is what made it great.
Right, and then because there was that build-up, and then at the end, it definitely felt rushed. I felt like that last season was 6 episodes, I believe.
Yeah, last season was 6. So season 7 was 7 episodes.
What they should have done is that should have been a 10-episode season, and that should have resolved the conflict with the Night King.
Yeah.
And I think the last season should have been another 10-episode season, and that should have kind of showed Daenerys' descent into madness. And that's how it should have been.
Well, think about it. They deprived us at a minimum of 7 episodes.
Oh yeah,
they
needed more than that, though. They needed a whole nother season.
Well, George wanted to go 12, 13 seasons. Like, he wanted to go.
Well, and they should have done that. And it's not like the ratings were falling off. They were.
So let me
they're hitting all-time highs.
Let me give credit where credit's due, and Three Body Problem could be a good series and IP for Benioff and Weiss because they're working off an existing story, an IP, and so when they take something that's already been written, they've proven they do a good job. Where they have fallen off is taking something where they have to do the writing and creating something when it's not already written down.
Right.
And they failed miserably at that. But these guys decided in their infinite wisdom when they're out promoting the three-body problem that they're going to talk about, and I know they were asked about it, but they're so arrogant. They were asked about the Jon Snow sequel, and according to Screenrant, as they were out doing their interviews, they said they don't know if it's something they would return for. First of all, you weren't asked to return.
You're fired.
You're not returning. No one involved with George R. R. Martin or Casey Blois or HBO is going to let you anywhere near Game of Thrones again. So, first of all, that's arrogant to even say that. You're not coming back for it. The second thing that they said was they had an idea for what they would like to see in a Jon Snow series. And here's their great idea. They want to see a much older Jon with real gray in his beard. The idea would be for one last ride for Jon Snow. Okay, so first of all, what do you think about that great concept?
Well, he's not that old. So, I mean, that would work if the show
20
comes
years
on,
from now?
20 years from now, it doesn't really.
Yeah. And you're gonna give him a gray beard. You're gonna dye it and make him look older, which would look ridiculous. It's a stupid idea, but Screen Rant. We want to give them credit for the article. But for those that read Screen Rant,
has a lot of bad takes, though.
Yeah, they have a lot of bad takes, and this is one of them.
Don't give them too much credit.
So Screen Rant talks about, this could be a very interesting idea. We could explore Jon Snow as an old man. The sequel of him, doing other things. Screen Rant talks about there's no real setup. Yes, there is. One, we leave the show with him going beyond the wall. He's killed Daenerys Targaryen, allegedly, although Drogon flies off with her body. So there's a whole lot of places you can go with that storyline, is if you assume that the Drogon is taking her to possibly Volantis, to where the Red Priestesses are. So we've got Bran on the throne. We've got Sansa in the north. This is shown to be a violent land. And we don't know that the whole idea of what the Night King was with Craster's babies being converted, we don't know that ultimate war is over. We think it is because we saw Arya kill the Night King, but there's so many different storylines.
Which is one of the dumbest things in the show.
Is dumb. And it makes a lot more sense if you know that wasn't really the end of the war. Mm-hmm. They thought it was. That's a way to explore the story where the Arya part has more validity. Now, if it's the ultimate end, then it is stupid. But so they talk about they're giving credibility to Benioff and Weiss an idea of the White Walkers are gone, that Bran is king, everything's good. So we don't think it makes a lot of sense to revisit Jon there. But so picking up decades later would provide crucial distance from Game of Thrones ending. Well, why do you think anybody would want distance from Game of Thrones ending? Because Benioff and Weiss screwed it up. That's why you would want distance. So it makes no sense to explore that. And to give you an idea of the creative genius of these guys when they don't write something, when they're having to just come up with ideas, look no further than when they were asked, according to Business Insider, they were given an interview recently, and this tells you everything you need to know about these guys when they have to come up with an idea on their own. So they were asked if you could change one thing about the series Game of Thrones. Just one thing, not 50, that you would probably need to fix all the mistakes they made the last 2 seasons.
There were 5 things that were unforgivable that I could name.
So hold that. Let's talk about that in just a second. Here was their idea of the one thing they would change, and it blows my mind that these guys would actually say this. So they talked about what will we change, and they said, you know what? If it's one thing that we have a regret that we would change, it's Mord the Jailer. Now, do
you really wanted to see more of him?
Yeah. Do you remember Mord the Jailer?
Only because I just rewatched.
So you've been rewatching it, so you remember. So 90% of the Game of Thrones fans
have no idea who he was.
Don't remember Mord the Jailer, and for good reason. He's the guy that when Tyrion Lannister in season 1 is taken to the Eyrie, and Catelyn Stark has him being held there.
He's in that sky prison.
He's in the jail that's basically hanging out over the cliff of the Eyrie, and he has a jailer, Mord, and he basically wants an audience, and with Lady Arryn, and he pays Mord a bag of gold. So these guys, and he says a Lannister always pays his debts. So these guys, their idea was, how cool would it be to have Mord the jailer show back up later on and have owned a tavern. And so we see him again, during a tavern scene where he's taking that money and he's opened a tavern. This is what the guys bring to the table when there's not an existing story already written.
Right.
This might be the dumbest idea. I don't want these guys anywhere near Westeros, Essos, anything having to do with Game of Thrones. They had their time. Let them go do something else. That alone shows you that any ideas they would have about a post-book series of Game of Thrones, they don't need to be anywhere near it. And I think the fact that they haven't really done anything since Game of Thrones proves that out. They probably have had a lot of ideas that they've pitched. They just haven't gone anywhere.
Well, they had their Star Wars thing get canceled.
They had an idea for Star Wars. Lucasfilm didn't want to do it. Of course, I'm not going to completely blame them for not being able to get along with Lucasfilm because nobody else does.
Rey Skywalker.
But these guys, so I've trashed them enough, before we talk about what Kit Harington has going on that maybe will keep him from Jon Snow, the Jon Snow series for the foreseeable future. You said 5 things that could be fixed in Game of Thrones. Give me your 5.
I think one, you had Arya killing the Night King was an absolute waste and destroyed the buildup of Jon Snow and the Night King. I mean, that was a travesty. I mean, that was absolutely terrible.
Not because Arya wasn't a great character, because she was.
That just didn't make sense. And some people say, well, no one expected it. And
her destiny was to kill Cersei.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it just didn't. That was awful. The other big thing that really bugged me was in that battle with the Night King. This may be the thing that bugs me the most because it's just so immersion breaking, because you get really invested in the world. You have what appears to be the entire Dothraki army ride out into the dark, right? And it seems like they all die, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you think there's just this, like, wow,
the same size as what we saw go to King's Landing.
Yeah.
And we saw
that they go to King's Landing 3 episodes later. They're all back. It's
with
like they've all just resurrected. Not a single one of them died. So we went from thinking they all got wiped out to it's like nothing happened. I mean, that was just so. There was, for a show that had so much attention to detail, I don't see how you missed that. You know what I mean? And that was atrocious. It made no sense.
That's 2.
The coincidence of kind of how they handled Jaime Lannister, how he just happens to run into the Greyjoy on his way to Cersei. Euron
they go
Greyjoy.
through the same path, right?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, well, here you are. And I don't mind that he killed him. I thought that was cool. But, like, just really, what are the odds? You're going to just run into Euron Greyjoy? And the whole romance thing with Brienne of Tarth, I thought that felt like fan service. I don't know if George actually read that in the book.
What about 2 brilliant characters in Varys and Littlefinger that for 6 seasons outsmarted everybody, and all of a sudden they became stupid? Varys, the stupidity of Varys and not going to Daenerys when he told her he was going to.
That doesn't bug me as much, only because he was always on her team from the very beginning. And I don't think he really saw her going crazy. Like, he didn't, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What bugs me and what would be,
I just thought Varys was smarter than that. I didn't like the way Varys went out.
well, and then with Littlefinger, I mean, I think he had so much, I think, lust for Sansa that he kind of.
What bothered me
went
about the
against his better
Littlefinger
judgment.
thing was how I saw it was so easy to see it coming. You had Arya and Sansa, and I just didn't believe that they were at odds. I saw Arya and Sansa that they were going to ultimately be loyal to each other, and I just didn't believe it. So when they were setting all that up, it just didn't. It just didn't play well for me. It didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Have I named 4 so far?
You've got 3.
3. Well, I did the Jamie's on 2 different things: the Brienne issue and then the Wade.
Okay.
And Daenerys, her descent into madness. That should have been an entire.
I'm okay with her going mad a little bit,
which I'm okay with.
but
that.
burning all of King's Landing.
I'm okay. I'm okay with her being bad. I don't have an issue with that. I think that's actually a great. It kind of makes her like Darth Vader in a way. It's a great story arc. Okay. The issue is you should have. We talked about how it should have been more seasons. You should have saw that descent into madness.
That plays better if you take more time.
Right.
She went from 0 to burn King's Landing, even though
6 episodes.
Yeah,
Like,
even though they had King's Landing, she was taking it.
Yeah.
It was unnecessary to burn it at that point, and she was smarter than that. So I mean, there's 100 things we could talk about in the last 2 seasons. The pace of it was poorly done, but you know,
one more was the way they handled the dragons. You had Drogon who just wipes out everybody; nobody can touch him, right? And the other 2 dragons just
died like that.
that. So it was, again, attention to detail when you just kind of use common logic and try to make a story that makes sense. You know, we know it's a fantasy world; it's not real.
Yeah.
You try to make something where it's like at least makes sense, and that didn't make sense. I mean, you know, one dragon gets wiped out with a ballista, and the other one can't even get touched. Like he's just wrecking everything. It's stuff like that, and that's a result of just being rushed. You know,
Being rushed, right? Yeah,
So-
and so speaking of being rushed, you know, I don't think Kit Harington's going to be in any rush to do the Jon Snow series because we have an announcement from Deadline of Kit Harington's next project. Now he's going to be appearing on a show that HBO has coming out, but he's producing a thriller that's described, according to Deadline, as a very British Western, which is about a hotshot who discovers his family is running a drug racket. And it's the working title is called Empire of Dirt. And it's produced not only by Harrington, but also his partner and scribe, Daniel West, from Thryker Films. So Daniel West, we know from his time with Gunpowder. That's the person that Kit is his writing partner, that he was developing the Jon Snow series with. That's why we mention this, is because it not only is news about Kit Harington, but it's also tied into the writer that was writing the Jon Snow treatment that he submitted to HBO that they may or may not have rejected. So it's an 8-part thriller. It's assumed that Kit's going to be playing a character named Jake. And so, you know, it takes place, the reason why they call it a Western is because it takes place around the character's family farm in the Lake District. And so the Lake District in England is similar to like Lake Tahoe. If you're thinking about the western part of the United States, you've got mountains, the Tetons, beautiful lakes. And so that kind of that visually stunning setting that maybe you don't see in a lot of the British shows that would be interesting to see. And so Kit's got that going on. And if that obviously gets picked up or the filming of it, he won't be doing, you know, if he's producing it and starring in it, that obviously will keep him from doing anything with it, Game of Thrones.
for a while.
At least for a while, right? And so that's news around what the latest for Kit Harington is. There's no new news around Jon Snow. Don't expect that there will be for a while. They've got reshoots, final reshoots going on right now for House of the Dragon at Leavesden for the show that's coming out this summer, and then they're filming Night of the Seven Kingdoms and very soon. So that'll probably be 2025. So we've got the World of Westeros coming to us this year and next year, and I anticipate they'll announce something around Aegon's conquest soon. I think that may be the next thing that's announced.